Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your Fulham podcast from Down Under. And we're back again this time to discuss the win against Sheffield United on the weekend. We're also going to be discussing Fulham women's win against Sutton, a couple of very good results over the weekend for Fulham. And we'll also touch on the under 21s who got a little bit of revenge when they played Leicester in the Premier League Cup, winning 4-0. To join me today to speak about everything, we have Elton. How are we going? Welcome back from your lovely trip.
Good evening. Good evening, listeners. Yep, thank you. Very happy to be back, actually. Feeling refreshed, a little bit suntanned, a little bit hairy, and but fully hydrated.
There's a little nod to the man who's not with us tonight, unfortunately. Sam has a voluntary medical emergency, you could call it. Um, that's the only way I can work out how to describe it. But he will be back with us, and I bet you wouldn't be overly surprised if he's not listening into this episode as well. So fully expect him to start chiming in with some comments halfway through, as I saw him subscribe to the channel slightly earlier, which is fractionally worrying. But let's see how we go anyway without Sammy. But it's good to have you back, Dad. It's been a couple of weeks without you, so it's nice to catch up, and I'm enjoying the beard as well.
Yep. Well, I actually did take my microphone away with me, as you know, and just the Wi-Fi or signal just was not good enough. It's in the middle of a national park, so what do you expect? I had to trade beautiful snorkeling water for internet, I guess. All worth
Well,
it.
on top of that, it was blowing an absolute gale when we did try and speak that one time, so could barely hear a word you were saying. But yeah, at
Mm.
least you're back now. You managed to catch the game on Saturday, and we can get straight in and start discussing it. So, looked at a 3-1 win against Sheffield United. We were coming off the back of a pretty disappointing game against Chelsea, a 2-0 loss, and um, more than anything, not just the actual result itself, but the performance was pretty poor. How did you feel we bounced back against Sheffield?
I actually thought overall, I thought we played pretty well, really. And I know this isn't an unoriginal piece of analysis, but uh, overall, we looked like a good football team from time to time, and just missed a strike force, or certainly a focal point up front
Mm.
to put the goals away. Um, Seems like a bit of a broken record, but I don't think there can be any other analysis other than that, really.
Yeah, I mean, we've known for the whole season so far. We knew as soon as Mitro left the club that we would struggle to find goals. It was good to see us put three away, but it did feel like there were times when we should have been putting more chances away. I mean, we'll look at the stats for the actual game itself, but Fulham had 20 shots on goal, which is not something Fulham do very often. The fact that we only put three of them away, and I mean that Kearney goal slash Fotheringham own goal is, I mean, you barely call that shot on target. He slips and it magically ends up in the back of the net, and then Willian scores in the second minute of injury time. Um, it just feels like we're still lacking that cutting edge, despite putting three away. I was really hoping Vinny came into the team and put the ball in the back of the net, but even Vinny maybe seemed like he's catching the yips a little bit.
Mm. Having said that, I mean, there were a couple of moments where I thought to myself, despite the fact that we're moaning about, our lack of strike power and goal scoring ability from that one man up front. Um, and I know coming into this game, people were a little bit concerned as to whether we might just get a problem from Sheffield United. Um, I know they had some pretty wild results against them recently, but you're thinking, look, they're in the Premier League, and there, there there are some decent plays in that side. But I was it really struck me as to how poorly organised they seemed, and how well, by comparison, well organised we seemed. Um, just the really very simple things, which knocking the ball around. Every time we lost possession, we got it back and seemed to move the ball around without any great difficulty. And there did seem to be a huge difference in quality between the two teams in terms of organisation and just how well drilled we seem to be.
I mean, we sort of touching on it a little bit. We're jumping straight into a conversation that we've had a few times now, which is around our strikers. And I agree with you. I think we did play some really good football. The build up play looked much better than it has in the past few weeks, and I put a lot of that down to Iwobi being in the side. BDR looked really good. He looked lively, and when he was on the ball, you could see he was working really hard and making things happen. So I think the fresh legs coming into the team and maybe guys coming in with a bit of something to prove as well made a difference. But again, there was a lot of build-up play, but not a lot of end product. And I think that's what we're missing. And I thought Vinny did a pretty good job overall, but I really felt like he should have put one of those chances away at least in the first half. And to go in at
Mm.
halftime at 0-0 felt like I kind of felt a bit like a loss. Like I did our halftime thoughts, and I was really struggling for positives. The positives was we sort of look better than we have done previously, but the negatives there are we still can't put the ball in the back of the net.
I think I have to agree with you. I think going in without having scored at halftime against the bottom side, it's got to be viewed as a fail, really,
Mm.
because we were not in any difficulty whatsoever. And even though we kind of looked quite good in different phases, and as you said, Vinny's link up play actually was pretty good, I thought. Um, yeah, it just again same old problem. We clearly have a major problem to solve, and I'm not actually sure how we're going to do that. Quite frankly, I really don't know uh, until a possible change of scenery in January. I'm not quite sure how this is all going to work out.
Yeah, I'm not even
Other
sure
than to say,
realistically.
sorry, Jack. Other than to
Yeah.
say that you, we're probably going to have to really rely on our wingers and Pereira and maybe some set pieces to win us goals. But if you think that you typically have to score a couple of goals to be assured of a win in the Premier League week in week out, really, it seems
Mm.
difficult to see where that's going to come from on a really consistent basis.
Yeah, I mean, last season we did spread our scorers out across, I can't remember the exact number, but it was something crazy like 12, 13, maybe even more than that, who did put the ball in the back of the net for us. And I mean, I attribute a lot of that to the fact that we had someone up front who created a lot of chances for those players, and I'm starting to
Mhm.
see that from Vinny. I know we saw Vinny. Basically, I mean, that first goal was a beautifully worked move, and it does come from him receiving the ball into feet, laying it out wide to Pereira, who then plays a perfect ball into the path of Decadova Reed, who finishes really well too. Um, so I'm not too stressed, and let's be perfectly honest as well. I don't think we're going to be signing that key forward in January. The club don't
Unlikely.
seem to be they don't seem to be interested in spending a huge amount of money. I know that the Silva contract is sort of rumbling on. There's been a little bit of news recently that Silva has said that they're still discussing a new contract, but while he's not signed anything, I can't imagine we're going to sign anyone in January and make any kind of investment, especially when you look at the league and you see the bottom three teams or even the bottom four teams in Sheffield, Burnley, Bournemouth, and Luton being so far away from the rest of the pack. It just feels like a bit of a safe season to actually not spend that money. I'd love us to spend that money, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Hmm. Well, um, what one what is actually going to happen now with Raul? I mean, what's the story there? If Silva is a man who likes to give people a run of games, um, what does that mean? Raul now sits out for 4 or 5 games while Vinny has a go.
Well, I mean, that's the question. I'm not 100% sure. It's you kind of give Raul that opportunity over and over again to score goals, but then if Vinny comes in and doesn't score goals, how can you allow him to keep that spot as well? You've dropped Raul because he's not scoring goals. Now Vinny has to score goals. I mean, do we then turn to Muniz and say you're the man to lead the line, and now it's your opportunity as well? Like, I think realistically, Vinny's going to get an extended run of starts now, and I think that's fair because that's kind of the way you do it. It would be unfair to give Raul 7 games and then give Vinny just one to prove himself. Um, so I
Sure.
expect we'll see Vinny start for the next 3 or 4 games at least. Unfortunately for Vinny, they're tough games, and we're not likely to get much out of them. Having to play, I think it's Spurs, Liverpool, Man United. I can't remember the exact fixtures upcoming, but you look at our next 4 games, it's very likely we could pick up no points. I think Brighton are in there as well, who are very hot and cold at the moment. You never really know what you're going to get. So it's an interesting one, but look, before we do talk about the second half, I think it's worth touching on that horrific injury to Chris Basham in the first half, which obviously held up play for 14 minutes. Um, I mean, that's just horrible to see happen to someone, but I think a bit of a proud moment as a fan, if you can swing it in a positive sort of sense, but a proud moment as a fan to see the whole stadium, home and away fans, getting up on their feet and applauding him, and you know, being fairly respectful. I know there's obviously a few bad eggs out there making stupid comments on Twitter, but it's good to see people being respectful of an injury like that happening to an opposition player. I think that was um, just good to see.
Well, and I'd go further than that and say an even prouder moment, and hardly surprising of a man like Tim Ream, who immediately goes to his aid and comforts him,
Mm,
and you know just behaves in an incredibly humane way, which you'd like to think any of our players would behave like that. But it's not surprising to see Tim Ream just step up and do that. And I don't know if you saw, but on on his Instagram, he actually personally shouted out Tim Ream
mm.
for that, which is very lovely to see.
Yeah, I know a lot of players, or a comment was sort of made that you could see a lot of players just didn't even want to be near that injury because is very graphic. I don't know what the coverage was like back in the UK, but for some reason, our coverage here in Australia, they showed that happen maybe 5 or 6 times, maybe even more, and it didn't get better the more you looked at it. And yeah, it's a tough one for a player like that at that age, especially to come back from. That's a very nasty injury. I know he's already been through one surgery. I think by the time we're recording this, he's probably already had his second surgery as well. But that's a long road back from recovery. So yeah, thoughts with Chris Basham after that injury because it is a nasty one. Um, but let's talk through the goals. We briefly mentioned the first one from Decordova Reid. Any more to add to that? I just thought it was a really beautifully worked Fulham
Oh
goal.
yeah, yeah, and again, huge plaudits to Vinny, who actually did the hard work in all of that, and not dissimilar to that little layoff he did to Solomon in Brighton v Brighton last season. Very very similar. Laid it off under huge pressure. I mean, the guy. I can't remember who was actually on him, but I presume it was the same centre back that was wearing his shirt all day,
Mm,
because he was very closely marked all day, and to actually have the composure and the physical leg and body strength to hold that up, turn, and lay the ball, beautifully weighted ball out in front of him is really something else. I mean, obviously, Pereira still had a lot to do, and it was a very, very high quality pass that he put across to Bobby Decordova-Reid. But just a lovely goal, just a great goal to look at, and the kind of thing that I guess we've become a little bit spoilt and accustomed to over the last year or two of seeing those sort of that kind of movement and those sort of goals on a fairly regular basis, particularly in the championship. And it felt like Sort of rolling back the years a bit on that.
Yeah, I mean, funny you mentioned that. Sheffield United really did feel like a bit of a championship team we were playing, and it did have that sort of feel about it where it was like those games we played in the championship where we're just that. And not it just sounds like we're being full of ourselves here, but we did seem that step above them in quality where we were just able to play passes that they weren't. We were able to break through their defense, and they weren't able to do the same to us. And um, it was a beautiful pass from Pereira. I actually, in watching it back, you realize he hits it first time. When you're watching it live, sometimes you're not really noticing that they hit it first time. I thought he sort of took a touch because he really waited to make sure he got the pass perfect, and to curl it around that last defender there and into the path of Bobby perfectly. He didn't even have to break stride for it, which was just brilliant. And then slots it so calmly past the keeper. A thought popped into a few people's head there, I reckon. Is Bobby maybe an opportunity to play as our main striker?
Is there anything he can't do? Um, yeah, I mean, look, we did try that one or two occasions last year, and it didn't really work. But given where we are right now, would it be that crazy? I mean, it seems mental to be throwing out three um, strikers and casting them aside and giving Bobby the job of actually playing in that position. But if he can be most effective, then why not? I look. I'm going to say no, because I think to your point that you made earlier last year when we were sharing the goals around, one thing that Metro obviously did very, very well is actually not only just link up play in midfield, but he was actually very, very good at getting assists and actually being very central. If he wasn't the man to provide the assist, he was within one pass of the goal, one or two passes of the goal actually coming about. And if Vinicius or anyone, but most likely Vinicius can be that man, then maybe that might be enough this season to actually create some of those chances. If he can't put the ball in the back of the net on a consistent basis or one or two of them in every game, but he could do that and perform that kind of function, I'd be pretty happy.
It's. I mean, we tried Bobby up front last time round. It didn't work. I remember especially that Brighton game where he just got completely overpowered. But I also believe our style has changed now that Mitro's not there. I don't think we're fully there yet, but we were always playing a Mitro-centric style where it was all about getting the ball into the box for our big striker to put the ball away. That's just not the case anymore. I mean, Jimenez is a speedy sort of player, and you can play the ball in behind. Vinny probably does play that bit of hold up play, which maybe is why it works a little bit better when he starts because we're more used to playing that style. I'm not sure we really suit Bobby as a striker. Again, I think he's great to just have on the wing. And for me, I love having him on the bench. And it's a weird one when you think about it and you look at someone and go, I just want you on the bench because I want him to come off the bench and actually impact games. And I think when you're talking about squad depth, having someone like that who can come off the bench and do good things in multiple different positions is such a weapon to have at your disposal. Look, I'm just glad he scored a goal. I think he's a very underrated player at the club, and he gets pulled from pillar to post fairly often as well. So it's good that he comes on, gets a reward as soon as he comes into the side. And I thought he worked really hard all day.
I'm not sure he is underrated at the club. I think he's underrated within the Premier League and certainly within the
Sorry,
media.
that's what I mean. Yeah,
Yeah, I think people know and highly appreciate what he does. Um, yeah, to your point about you know loving someone like Bobby on the bench, it feels like there's just a couple too many players who sit in that category, like Harry
yeah.
Wilson, uh, great off the bench, but does he, on a week to week basis, is he really the guy that we need to partner with someone like a Willian in full force. I'm not sure that's
Yeah, I mean
true.
that's
You know,
Tom Kenny's role, full stop, isn't it?
well, I was
Coming off
about
the
to say
bench.
Tom Kearney, fantastic off the bench, but he probably isn't good for 90 minutes, um, and maybe not good in absolutely every situation. But
Mm,
you don't want that. You don't want an imbalance where you've got too many of these players who are only impact subs, and you haven't got enough reliable people of quality on the pitch. Um, but look back to the problem or challenge of how do we manufacture a striker out of the players that we've got here. I feel like Bobby's not the answer, and it has to come down to one of the three guys stepping up. It seems way too much to imagine that Muniz is going to come out of nowhere, because I sort of feel like I know what he's capable of. It does seem to be some improvement there, but it doesn't really feel like he's about to absolutely astound everyone and turn
mm.
into a player of infinitely greater quality. I don't see that happening.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I'd agree with
and
that.
I feel like you're right in that I think there has been some adjustment since Metro's left, but I don't see us having transformed the way we play. Um, and maybe because Jimenez is he's a kind of a weird hybrid. He's actually fairly big, fairly physical guy, um, and he's also quick, but he's not exactly one of these players who um, get involved in really quick, tricky little triangles in the box, which
Mm,
end up in a goal. It's not really doesn't really seem to be that player either. So
mm.
so it's not that surprising that we haven't fully transformed, because we don't have Van Nistelrooy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Um, looking at the second goal, well, not the second goal, sorry, the second goal of the day, which was Sheffield United's only goal of the day, and put into the net by Anthony Robinson. Now, usually we get on this and talk about how the defense failed and how it was a horrible mistake, or this is the reason why we let in a goal. This is a different one where, unfortunately, Diop picks up the ball, and we both mentioned this as well when we talked the other day, saying I did see Diop bend down earlier, maybe 10 minutes before this incident, touching his foot, maybe holding his ankle. Wasn't really sure what was going on. He looked knackered. I don't really know what was happening, but he takes the ball, collects it on the edge of the box almost, takes one touch, and instantly pulls up. But unfortunately, gives the ball away to the Sheffield player who plays it out wide. Ball is played into the box. There's an extra man advantage. And unfortunately, Robinson can't really do anything with the cross and turns it into the back of the net. Take a very slight deflection off one of the Sheffield players on the way through, and it was very close to being offside as well. But just one of those. And tweeted it at the time. It felt very Fulhamish that everything's going swimmingly. You score this brilliant goal. You look like you're going to come away with a comfortable win, and then your player gets injured and gives the ball away, and we concede.
Yeah, I think I've lost Jack. I think he's dropped out. Uh, I actually, I remember when Diop was limping around, and you could see him a few minutes before actually testing out his leg, and I remember
Mm,
thinking, "Well, that doesn't look right." And then I've heard people say, "Oh, Sheffield United should have put the ball out, or maybe Diop should have done better." Look, when you have something which appears to be quite a serious injury, I don't think we have a full understanding of what's happened. But I think Silver alluded to the fact that it's a fairly nasty injury.
he said he
Um,
heard a crack or
so,
something, and yeah,
well, things are moving at light speed. You can't expect him to have done any better there. So that is what it is. We lose the ball. Now, thing I haven't had a chance to look at that again, but I've heard some noises around the fact that when the cross comes in, the player who gets that slight deflection which maybe excuses Robinson's position and what happens with his right foot. But is that player clearly onside when
Yeah,
he
he
actually
was.
gets the deflection? Okay,
They did check
okay,
it. He was very slightly behind. I mean, it's close. It needed the lines to be drawn on VAR, but he
okay.
was behind. I thought at first
Yeah.
maybe there's a chance that he might be offside. It was close, but yeah, he's definitely on.
Well, the other thing that, and again, it sounds harsh because I think Robinson actually had a pretty good game, but I'm thinking that if that was on Robinson's left side, that doesn't go in the net, but it
Yeah,
looked
maybe.
pretty bloody awkward with his right foot. His whole body position was pretty awkward.
Yeah, it's come in at a
And I
very
know,
awkward height for him. It was sort of just a sort
and
of
a bit of a
stomach
deflection.
height
It's a
where,
deflection as
yeah,
well.
you're trying to, and things are moving quick, and you know that there's a man down. So,
Sure.
um, yeah, look, I can't fault us for that. If that happened to us, I wouldn't expect us to put the ball out of play either. I
No,
did
no,
see
no,
a
sure not.
tweet.
Surely not.
I can't remember who it was who tweeted it, but I believe that's the third time this season we've conceded a goal with a player either down injured or Kenny Tete's boot coming off. There's the Bassi incident against Arsenal where he got taken down um, on the byline. There's this Diop incident as well, and then obviously Kenny Tete when he had to run into the change room and change his boot. That's 3 goals this season that we've conceded in really bizarre circumstances. But again, it's nothing you can really plan for. You can't go on the training ground and plan for what happens if someone gets injured and how you quickly adjust in the next 30 seconds. These are just
Oh, not
unfortunate
even.
things that happen in
I
football.
don't even think it was 30 seconds. It was very, very quick. And suddenly you are a man down and you're exposed. And I think I do remember Leno picking Robinson up from the ground and kind of giving him a bit of a pat in the back to somewhat console him that you'd expect your goalkeeper to be pretty unhappy about an
Mm.
own goal like that, but Leno could clearly see not a comedy of errors that it was, but it was a fairly unfortunate set of sequence of circumstances that you really couldn't do very much about. So one of those things.
Yeah, it was an interesting reaction as well from the whole team. No one really complained massively to the referee, and it's kind of good. You don't want everyone getting around the ref and really whinging at him and saying, "Come on, what are you doing?" And I thought the referee as well actually had a very good game, considering he
Yeah,
was
yeah.
refereeing. I think in League One 2 years ago, which is a very quick path to the Premier League, and it just shows that there are good referees out there, and maybe the referees who've been in the Premier League for a little bit too long have those biases and have those inabilities to make decisions because they're backed by all this technology. And I think the referee had a really good game. I just throw that out there while we're talking about it.
No, I
Um,
I agree with you, Jack. Agree with you wholeheartedly. But and maybe it's also one of those things where the Premier League is the top of the tree. So once you get there and you've played a few seasons or refed a few seasons, there's kind of nowhere to go, and so you stay there. And
mm,
it seems that there's very little churn because I think it's quite difficult for these younger referees to actually get an opportunity. But perhaps with all the heat over the last weeks of some really dire performances, both off the field and on the field, and I'm meaning VAR, that maybe the FA have had to look broader and start promoting people through the ranks who are
I think they
genuinely
have to
good.
because they're genuinely having
Yeah,
to suspend referees because of poor performances, and that's exactly what they should be doing as well. If a referee has a bad game, you back down to the championship, mate. Earn your
yeah,
stripes again, and then come back up. It's the
totally.
only way to do it is just to continue rotating through referees and try and find some quality because there must be quality out there. I mean, I've played a fair bit of football and played with some very good referees at a very low level of football. And you wonder how these professionals who go through multiple training courses and have thousands of games of experience can get it so wrong sometimes. It's
No,
bizarre.
but as I said, Jack, I think it's a bit of a mates club at the top of the
Yeah,
tree
100%.
that these guys are experienced. Doesn't mean they're that sharp anymore. I'm not even talking about biases. It's just like they're just perhaps not at the top of their game anymore, and I
Mm,
think it's very hard to move them on. And I think there's been a reluctance to move them on, and maybe just maybe that might change because, as you say, there will be some really good referees up and down the league, certainly within the top 3 leagues, that
mm,
probably just aren't moving up the ladder fast enough.
yeah. Anyway, let's not get bogged down in ref chat because that's really boring stuff.
I
Moving
know,
on
but
to
it's
the
we're being very positive about refs.
I know. So I just don't like talking about them. Moving on to the Tom
Fair enough.
Kearney goal. I'm going to call it the Tom Kearney goal because I think he
Mm.
deserves it. Kearney, a really good bit of midfield work there where Fulham win the ball back after losing it, win it back quickly. And Tom Kearney, it just felt like the right zone for him to take a shot in. We've seen him score a number of goals from there for Fulham over the last 8 years. It's in game 299 for Tom Kearney as well. He takes a shot, he slips, it comes off his left foot into his right foot, floats up in the air, somehow gets perfect dip, hits the crossbar onto Fotheringham's back and into the back of the net. And again, I tweeted pretty much straight after saying the goal we conceded was very Fulhamish, and this goal felt just as Fulhamish as well, where it just we got the rub of the green with that one for sure.
It's a bit like the Metro penalty
Yeah,
slip,
I
wasn't
did
it?
think that.
Oh, look, I don't think anyone minds when Tom Kearney is in about that position and has a crack because he's
Hmm.
got an uncanny knack of being able to find the goal. Yeah, he's just a great player to have on your team, isn't he? It's a bit of a shame, really, that we're at the back end of his career. I don't want to talk him out of the squad, but it's just a shame that we can't be getting even more out of him because he's the kind of creative player that I think Marco would just love to have more access to, if you know what I mean.
Mm. Yeah, and look, he's perfect coming off the bench for us at the moment. I'm very happy seeing him come off the bench and make an impact in that fashion most of the time. I think not many clubs have someone who, well, a few clubs do. I remember John Joe Shelby coming off the bench and doing something similar last season, and just coming off, and all of a sudden that player comes onto the field and they just add that creative spark to the game, and that's really what Kenny did when he came on, and always does when he comes on as well. He just opens up the field a little bit more. He sees a few more passes that maybe Iwobi and Pereira don't see sometimes. And so it's always good to see him come on and always good to see him score a goal as well. I know it's not in his name, but it is great to see him succeeding. 299 games under his belt, similar to Tim Ream, just a couple of club legends who've been with Fulham through thick and thin over the last 8 years. And it was just nice to see him come on and get a bit of joy because I think everyone's happy when Tom Kearney's happy. Um, and look, it felt like when Robinson scored that own goal, the game might peter out into one of those really annoying draws where you have 20 shots on goal and you only score one. Sheffield barely trouble us and we score an own goal and come away from a game where we should have picked up 3 points with just the one. But we did close this one out well. Willian scored the final goal of the day. Just a classic Willian goal, Dad, cutting in from the left onto his right foot. Keeper should have done better, I'd say, but at the end of the day, Fulham 3, Sheffield United 1.
Sure. Yeah, I think in another moment, Willian probably could have scored earlier off a very similar opportunity, but just finds the keeper. And like you say, it's a very Willian kind of. You'd think that people have worked that out. Although, having said that, he's not that predictable. He's just as likely to go to the left. But really, when there is that opportunity, it's almost like players standing around ought to know that if there is that gap to the left of the man trying to block him, you know where he's going to go.
I think it's
Um,
just his pace, how
mm,
quickly he
that little
can
shoulder that
shift his
drops.
whole body weight and create that
Mm.
little bit of space, and then you expect him to take a shot, and he just sort of feigns the shot and takes another touch away and gains some more space, and that's exactly how he scored the goal. Basically, again, I think the keeper should have done much better because he gets a very solid
Mm.
hand to it, but palms it into the side
But he's
netting.
hit
But
it
that
pretty
was
well.
game. Yeah, and
He's
look,
hit it pretty well.
even at 2-1, it didn't feel like Fulham were really threatened that often.
Yeah.
Usually going at that point in the game, 25 minutes plus injury time to go, I'm biting nail, or not 25, sorry, 15 minutes plus injury time to go. I'm usually biting nails and worried about us potentially throwing it away, but just didn't feel like that. And I think that's the gap in quality this season, especially where these teams, they're just not threatening the goal. And you know that all you need to do is put the ball in the back of the net once, and it should be game over most times. And look, more than anything, I'm just glad that we did.
How did you feel about Iwobi starting ahead of Harrison Reed?
I really like him. I don't fully understand him yet. Um, he's got something about him. He's got some character. He's got some positivity. He's got some confidence, and I think we'll see that confidence grow as well. I really like him as a player. I want to see more of him, and I think this was an attacking move where Silva said, "Right, we probably don't need two defensive midfielders for this game. Let's throw Iwobi in. Let's give Pereira some support in a more attacking position. Let's allow Iwobi to just float and be wherever." And I think it worked pretty well. I'd like to see more of it. Will we see more of it? I think only in very certain games. For example, the next four fixtures we've got, I wouldn't be surprised if Iwobi started off the bench and came on in a very different role.
I found myself thinking, um, I I wish we had a player which was basically a hybrid of Iwobi and Harrison Reed, because um, Polinia was kind of left to do it on his own in midfield and defensive midfield, and Iwobi was really exciting, and he's busy, and he's, I'm not going to say chaotic, but he's quite unpredictable, and he really puts himself about, and I like his energy and what he does going forward. But I've sort of found myself thinking that if we were playing a much, much better side, I wonder if we would have felt a bit exposed defensively.
Oh,
Um,
100%. I think that was, but like I said, I think that's part of the selection policy was Silva knowing that we're unlikely to be tested hugely in midfield, and you can let Polinia just dominate that midfield battle and feel very comfortable that Iwobi doesn't have to do much of that defensive work. Iwobi is quite good defensively, but I think he just wasn't required, and so he was given a more advanced role, and it worked. I was happy with it. But like I said, the upcoming fixtures we play Spurs and Brighton away after this international break, and then we have Man United at home, followed by Aston Villa away. So we've got they're four fixtures where if things go well, we pick up maybe 6 points, probably four if things go well. It's very possible that we come away from those four fixtures with nothing. So picking up points here is important, and I think the makeup of the side during those games is going to be important as well because we're not going to be able to be as expansive as we were against Sheffield. We're going to have to be a little bit tighter at the back and a little bit more defensive through the middle. Where I could see actually maybe Pereira getting dropped and Reed, Polinia, and Iwobi all playing a little bit deeper, but having the ability to push forward when needed in a sort of counter-attacking sense, but adding some defensive depth, if that makes sense.
it does. Does the international break give Kenny Tete enough time to be fit? And if he is fit, does he displace Castagna?
I think he does. I think Tete should be starting. I love Castagna so far. I'm really enjoying what I'm seeing from him, and I love how flexible he is to be able to play left and right back. But Kenny Tete is a class above. Tete also hasn't been picked for international duty. I'm not sure if that's down to his injury or not, but that definitely helps. It gives him, well, what's the date today? The 9th, and we don't play again until the 24th. So gives him a solid 2 weeks of rest from here. Anthony Robinson also hasn't been picked for international duty, despite being fit. He does have a little niggle apparently, and so I think he requested to be left out. So there's a chance for a few of these players to get some rest and recovery.
Apparently, it's a hernia, early stage hernia problem.
Yeah, and so I think having a bit of rest will definitely help Robinson. But look, I mean, it's definitely one of those positions where I'm actually not too worried about it because I feel like we have some depth there. I know last year, if you were saying, does Kenny Tete get back in the side over Kevin and Babu or Levin Kazawa? It's a very different conversation. But all of a sudden, we've got some depth now where I hope Tete comes back in, but if he doesn't, I don't think we're going to miss out hugely because Castagna has been a very worthy backup option so far.
Do you think Willian is now back from where he's been over the last month or so?
No. I don't think he's hitting the heights he was last season. He scored a
I
goal,
thought
obviously.
he had a good game. I thought he had a
he
good
did
game.
play pretty well, but he's not destroying teams like he was last year. He was on fire last year. It was superb. He was unstoppable. And maybe it's the fact that he doesn't have the same players around him as he did last season in Mitro, who helped set up a lot of stuff for him and was a target in the middle. But I'd actually just like to see a bit of rotation now that we have those players. We can play Wilson, Willian, BDR, Iwobi on the wing as well. Like we've got some options there. Adama when he comes back from injury, I think there needs to be a little bit of rotation through those wings, and I think we saw with BDR coming into the side in place of Harry Wilson, who's improved week on week. BDR comes in and had a really good game. I thought, you'd probably push for him to be one of the players I'd put forward as man of the match. So I think it's Willian's not back fully, but I don't have any issues with him starting and continuing to start. And I also think having a bit of rotation would be healthy for the side anyway. So I'd be happy for him to drop out and someone else to come in and have a couple of games. I'd be happy with his impact off the bench. And I'm happy with his performances so far as well.
And I feel like I'm interviewing you here, but I've got a lot of questions. Harry Wilson, how do you reckon he went? I'll tell you my view. I thought he should have done a lot better. I know he didn't have that much time, but I thought he should have done a lot better given how weak an opposition they were. This is Harry Wilson literally playing a championship side, and we know how well he did against championship level players. Am I being a bit too harsh, or am I seeing a slight in confidence?
I think you're probably being a bit harsh. He came on in the 78th minute, so he only had 10 minutes to make an impact. I
Yeah.
don't think he had many opportunities to have an impact. I think he's week on week improved. I think he's getting better and better and starting to look more and more a Premier League player. So I'm not, again, similar to Willian, even though the performances aren't peaking at the moment. I do think I do think we're almost there and we're getting better. Unfortunately, the problem is we're coming into a run of games that are tough. And it's not what you want when you're trying to find form because it's going to be tough to actually keep up the pace at that point. Let's keep rattling through this because I want to talk about the women's and the under 21s as well. But let's look at the stats from the game. Fulham with 60% possession to Sheffield's 40. As I mentioned before, Fulham with 20 shots on goal. 6 of those on target to Sheffield's 5 shots on goal with just 2 on target. Fulham 517 passes to Sheffield's 342, 9 corners for Fulham to 4 for Sheffield, and 8 fouls by Fulham to 10 fouls by Sheffield. Let's have a quick look at the table. Fulham now sitting in 12th place, up 1 place from 13th last week. 11 points, level with Chelsea, -5 for the goal difference. The big thing there, though, that I see is 17th, 18th, both have 4 points. That's Luton and Burnley, respectively. Bournemouth, 3 points in 19th place, and Sheffield United with just the single point. Interestingly, when you look at that, if you combine the bottom four's points so far for the whole season, they've only picked up 12. And Fulham already on 11 points after 8 games. It's a good start. Dad, do you just feel, I feel like I'm mentioning it almost every week at the moment, but do you feel like there really is that quite large gap between Fulham and the promoted sides plus Bournemouth at the moment?
In terms of quality, I definitely feel that, despite the problems we're having, and we're not firing properly as yet, no doubt about it. So if we had a firing goal scorer, you'd kind of feel we'd be 15 points, 15, 16 points already, but we're not, and we're still 11. In terms of quality, I think we're a much better side than those bottom four. In terms of points, I'm uneasy that there's not enough space in between those bottom four sides and us. I mean, I know it's 7 points, but that's not enough.
I think after 8 games, 7 points is pretty significant, to be honest. I know the other 14 put up their baseline tracker at the moment, and Fulham are apparently 2 points ahead of schedule, whereas Sheffield United are 8 points behind schedule at the moment. So Sheffield
I
should have
know,
picked up 9 points from 8 games, and Fulham should have picked up 9 as well.
I know, Jack. But what we were not long ago discussing the fact that it's quite possible out of the next 3 or 4 games we may get no points, or maybe one or two. Um, and so not that I expect those bottom three sides to suddenly, in these next 4 games, go on a run of wins.
Yeah.
And even if one of them does, they're not all going to win. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
so
I
there
think
could be some movement. I'm not. I I'm not scared of the sort of big R. I'm just feeling like, for the overall quality that we have, to answer your question, for the overall quality that we have compared to those bottom four sides, we should we should be 15 points, and we should be moving dramatically away from them.
yeah, and look, I think we missed an opportunity against Palace to pick up a few extra points. Taking us to 13 points would make all of a sudden quite a big difference, because I think at that point we're probably just one win away from actually European spots. And it is too early to make sweeping statements about where we're at for the season as well. But it's interesting to look at least, I think, and sort of analyze it in a way and say there does seem to be some grouping already happening. I know at the top of the table you see a bit of grouping as well, with those top 6 sides who really are blazing away with the season already. In Arsenal, Spurs, Man City, they're making that little group of 3 at the top, and I feel like there's a group of 4 at the bottom here. And I think probably around the 12, 13 game mark, if we're still maintaining a gap and those teams in the bottom 4 aren't starting to pick up points more regularly, I think we can start to make some assumptions then that we're I'm not saying safe, but I think it would take a total capitulation for us to fall into a relegation dogfight at that point.
Well, to
Um,
your point earlier, I think this. I don't want to speak too soon. I don't want to jinx anything, but we may just be fortunate this season that, whilst we could have done a lot better with our signings, etc., we could just have 4 pretty poor sides that are going to save the day for us.
yeah, absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, that's kind of all you need, and all you want every season. You just what do they say when you're in the water and there's a shark attack? All you need to do is be able to swim faster than one other person, and you're going to be safe. And that's basically what we need to do here. We need to swim faster than 3 other teams, and at the
Uh,
moment, we are.
sh- Sharks are more targeted than that.
Yeah, not the
They,
relegation shark,
they'll often swim past the target for
not
another
this
one.
relegation shark. Anyway, let's move on and have a quick chat about the under 21s. They had a good result in the Premier League Cup. We discussed them last week. We talked about their loss to Leicester, and it was a big upset. Leicester was sitting second bottom in the under-21s league, and Fulham had been completely unbeaten and absolutely flogging teams at that point. Unfortunately, went down the week before in the league, but bounced back really nicely in the cup. 2 goals here from Languedoc, 1 goal from Josh King, 1 goal from Luke Harris. Now, worth mentioning, Josh King is just 16 years old. He's been playing for the under-18s for a while, and he's actually now been called up to the England under-17s as well. I don't know if you've seen many highlights of it, but he's a real talent. And Fulham have been really good at producing these players recently. We've seen with Sessegnon, Elliott, Carvalho, and now we're seeing Josh King coming through the system as well, and obviously Luke Harris, who scored in this game too. But exciting to see a young player coming up, just 16 years old and scoring for the under-21s.
Oh, and to answer your question, I don't know very much about him at all, but I hope I learned something through this. It's pretty significant. I I was actually having a chat with Josh, your brother-in-law, today. We're watching a bunch of kids play basketball. I was commenting on about this, 11-year-old kid who was really quite good at shooting hoops, and then thinking to myself, really, if you're going to be a great athlete, by the time you're about 14, 15, definitely 16, you are already completely standout. And so it's not that surprising that someone is 16 and is actually playing in many years above himself. But that is pretty special when at 16 you're playing under 21s, or even playing, is he playing international under 17s, or called up to that group?
Yeah, so he's just been picked for the England under-17s.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I look, I don't know anything about him, Jack, to be honest, but uh, I um, I hope we can see him do some special things and start to follow him.
Yeah, and look, it was his under-21s debut as well, which makes it even more special. Scored after
Mm,
15 minutes. Just having a look at the goal here, the ball sort of lands on the corner of the 6-yard box, gets knocked back to him by Languedoc, I think it is, and he just puts his foot through it and hits it so sweetly. And I've seen a few highlights of him playing for the under-18s so far, and he sees
where
passes
does
that
he
other
play?
players
Where does
don't,
he play?
and he's a central midfielder. Um, and he's a creative type. He reminds me quite a lot of Fabio Carvalho in the way he has
Okay.
those sort of driving runs through defenses, plays defense splitting passes, but also scores as well. And I think that's kind of what's exciting at the moment. He's an interesting player and definitely one to keep an eye on, because I think he could be our next Harvey Elliott, our next Fabio Carvalho, our next big thing. And I think cooking in the under-21s is a perfect way to go about it, because he's playing alongside some really good players. He's going to get that winning mentality as well in this really strong group of young guys at the club. And he's been training on and off with the first team as well, so he's getting some experience there. Training against guys like João Palhinha, Andreas Pereira. It must be a really eye-opening experience for a 16-year-old. And I think he's going to go a long way. He's a talented kid, and like I said, it's great to see that that's being recognised as well. Josh King and Sam Amissa as well, who you might remember, he made a couple of appearances on the preseason tour in America. Both recently been selected by England for the under-17s, which is really good. Another person to get an international call up, Luke Harris. He's going to be spending the first part of the international break with the Wales senior team, and then joining up with the under-21s for the European qualifier. There's a little bit of chat about the fact that he could actually get his first appearance for the Wales senior team, and he got on the score sheet as well against Leicester. So it's just really good to see these guys bouncing back from a disappointing loss and just putting Leicester to the sword and getting a really good win, but also getting rewarded for it as well with some of these call-ups. So to go through some of the other under-21 call-ups, Ibain Bowett and Kieran Bowie, both players Scottish, called up for the Scotland's under-21s. Luke Harris and Jay Williams, both called up for the Wales under-21s. George Ockes called up for Cyprus. Ollie O'Neill for Republic of Ireland. And Adrian Pajaziti is called up for the Albanian team. Just a lot of positives to take out of seeing those guys getting called up. And on top of that as well, I forgot to mention Matt Dibley-Diaz and Luke de Fougerolles both called up for the senior teams. So
Yeah, I was
Dibley-Diaz,
going to
obviously
mention
a New
that.
Zealander, and de Fougerolles from Canada. Great to see some of these young guys who aren't even making an impact on the first team yet being recognised on the international stage.
Definitely. And I mean, obviously, you know, Canada and New Zealand are not in the elite level of international football, but it's still a huge feat at their age to be called up to senior international level. Um, and look, we're talking about it. I think many people have already noticed those guys. But it's exciting, and hopefully it just brings more and more and more experience to those players. And in and around the first team squad, they're going to get noticed and hopefully
Yeah,
get the
absolutely. I
opportunity.
mean, it's worth noting. I know you say that they're not big footballing nations, and they're not, but you know, Canada are
Still,
playing against Japan, and
well,
as
sure,
Australians, we know how
sure,
strong Japan are as a footballing nation, and for New Zealand are playing against the Democratic Republic of Congo. Might get a game against
sure,
Niskins Cabano there, which would be great. And actually playing Australia as well. So they're going to
yeah,
get some pretty good games in there, and hopefully they do get some appearances and get to get their first international caps. But even then, just a great experience. You know, they're going to be flown out overseas to go to these games, and I really hope that they do get their first caps because I think it's a mark of how well the academy is working at the moment that we're seeing so many of the guys who are playing for the under-21s getting international call-ups at an under-21s level, but also getting their senior call-ups even before they get first team appearances.
sure. Yeah, like you say, I mean, what doesn't it kind of doesn't matter the team you're selected into. You're going to come up against some very good competition at an international level. And it's all good
Mm,
experience, no doubt about it.
yeah, absolutely. Um, Another thing to have a quick look at is the under 21 top goal scorers. Now, Marshall Gotto still out on loan at Wigan, and it's worth mentioning him as well. He's actually recently been voted Wigan's Player of the Month for his first month at the club for his appearances. So that's, again, a really good indication of how well things are going in the junior setup. Ollie O'Neill with 4, Osmond, McFarlane, and Donald all with 3 goals apiece. Ockes, McCoy Splat, Terrell Works, Christian Sikalaric, Imani Langadok, all with 2 goals apiece, and then Tanton, Dibley-Diaz, Isenga, King, and Luke Harris with 1 goal each. Isenga and King there also, just to mention that they are very young blokes. They're 16, 15, 16-year-olds playing under 21s and getting on the score sheet. It's just
That's
there's a
great.
lot of positives coming out of the under 21s at the moment, and I think it's worth continuing to cast an eye over them as much as possible because this is a talented group of youngsters with potentially a few superstars floating around, especially when you look at blokes like Goddo and Stansfield who are out on loan and playing league football and making appearances and making names for themselves as well. It's exciting times, and I'm really excited by this under 21s team.
No, for sure.
Moving on, and to finish up, we're going to talk about Fulham women's team. They had a superb win on the weekend against Sutton United. Sutton was sitting, I think, fourth in the league before this game started. Had a really good start to their season, and Fulham with a really good performance against tough opposition. But again, another thing that we've seen from Fulham women's in the last few weeks, they went down against Millwall, bounced back, conceded in the 15th minute against Sutton, and just didn't let it affect them too much. I think that's the biggest thing here. I've managed to get a bit of an inside track on the goals, even though they haven't been released yet. So I've managed to know roughly what happened with these. First goal from Megali Mendez, a superb free kick, an absolute screamer to make it 1-1. Just before half time, Georgia Heisman made it 2-1 to Fulham. Sophie Manzi passed the ball on to Sasha Adamson, who beat her player really well, passed the ball across goal, and Georgia just had to slot the ball past the keeper. A really good finish. Early in the second half, a lovely ball again from Sasha Adamson, who's really creating a lot of chances for Fulham this whole season and has been a really standout signing from hashtag FC. Put a ball through to Heisman again, who beat the last player, slotted into the corner. So that's 3-1 up after 46 minutes. Megali Mendez got her second of the afternoon with a nice cutting in off the right with a nice touch, slotting in past the keeper who just had no chance. And a 4-1 victory really continues to put the pressure on Dartford, who are currently sitting on top of the league. Let's take a quick look at the table because that'll tell the picture a little bit more if I can find it. Did I put it in the slides? No, maybe I didn't. Yes, I did. Here we go. So Dartford currently sitting top on 21 points, 7 wins from 7 games. Fulham, unfortunately, dropping points early in the season, sitting on 16 points. Dartford do have some tough games up ahead, though. They play Ebbsfleet, and I believe they play Dulwich Hamlet as well, maybe, I think, over the next couple of weeks. So there is the possibility for them to drop some points. I think it's Ebbsfleet and Sutton, sorry, they play. They also have a pretty bad schedule where they play on the Sunday and then again on the Tuesday, whereas Fulham play this Wednesday and again on Sunday. So, look, if Fulham get a couple of wins over the next few games and keep the pressure on Dartford, Dad, do you think that, I know it's early season still, there's a long way to go, but who's in the box seat here when you're chasing a team who are unbeaten at the start of the season? Do you feel like the pressure's sort of off Dartford because they've been playing so well, or do you think the pressure's off Fulham because you're chasing a team that just keep winning?
I think the pressure's on both of them because it's very difficult to a 2, possibly 3 horse race here between Dartford, Fulham, and Ebbsfleet. But back to Tia's comment about how difficult it is with only one team being promoted. It's so tough. It's so very, very tough that you just cannot afford to drop even 1, 2, 3 games here. You're in serious difficulty. So it's a very, very high pressure. But if I were Fulham, I'd probably be feeling that they signed some new players, and perhaps they didn't. And I'm just making this up because I don't know how true this is, but I'm just wondering whether it took a little bit of time to bed those new players in. But now that team seems to be playing with a lot of cohesion and a lot of confidence, I think the Fulham women probably have every right to be feeling like over a long season they can be very consistent and consistently score a lot of goals. And that's the key, isn't it? I mean, if you can score, consistently score no fewer than 3 or 4 goals, provided you have a defensive capability, you're odds on to be winning games. And they've played a number of those top sides with Saltdean, Sutton, Ebbsfleet, over the last few weeks. So it's not like they've been knocking over bottom of the table clubs. So to answer your question, I'd be feeling pretty highly confident that they can stay with Dartford and breathe down their neck, and Dartford can't afford to slip up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you do sort of have to cross your fingers a little bit and hope that you do get a slip, because that is the only way to overtake them. Obviously, you just wait until you play them again. And unfortunately, until then, it's kind of out of your hands. And I think that does take a lot of pressure off, though, is knowing that all you need to do is go out there and keep doing what you're doing. Fulham are playing some beautiful football this season. We're creating chances. We're scoring goals. Admittedly, the defence could do with some shoring up, and we could do with a clean sheet. But we've also had some pretty tough fixtures. As you mentioned, we've played Sutton United sitting in 5th. We played Saltdean sitting 6th. We played Ebbsfleet sitting 3rd. We obviously lost to Dartford, who are sitting 1st, and we drew with Ashford. And again, early season, it was tough to sort of find our feet with all those new signings coming into the club. But we've had a pretty rough run of fixtures to start the season, and I don't think you'd be expecting to have had such good results off the back of that. Maybe at the very start of the year, obviously, always aiming high, but with the game coming up against Dulwich, so I'll just go to the upcoming fixtures. The next fixture is against Dulwich Hamlet. That's on Sunday, the 11th of October. That's an evening game at Motspur Park. Thursday, the 12th of October, that game is. Start again. That is Wednesday, the 11th of October. Is giving me the Australian time, so apologies for that. Wednesday, the 11th of October, 7:30 p.m. kickoff at Motspur Park under lights. Should be a really good game, and it's a tough one as well. As I said, Dartford are sitting 4th in the league. But the big thing after that is the run of fixtures. We've got Enfield Town, Dorking Wanderers, and Ashford to sort of round out the next few fixtures. If we have a look back at the table again, seeing Enfield Town have picked up 1 point from their first 6 games. Dorking Wanderers have been a little bit hot and cold, but conceded quite a few goals despite having 9 points from 6 games. I think there's a possibility of a really good little run of fixtures here where if we can get past this Dulwich Hamlet test on Wednesday night, we could be in for a really good run of fixtures and really see ourselves put a lot more pressure on Dartford, who have some tough fixtures themselves coming up.
I think the sense I'm getting is that Steve J has got a very organised outfit here. I think they seem to be very well drilled. They're very well prepared. There's an inner confidence, which probably explains why they have been able to get themselves out of situations where they've gone one down, and there's some composure there. There's an inner confidence. So I remember when we were talking to Tia, and we I guess tried to tease out not so much their ambition, but how they kind of felt they could, or what they could achieve this season. I very much got the sense that there was a kind of view within the team not to look too far ahead and just to focus on week by week, just doing what they do, and then the results will look after themselves, and the league position will look after themselves. I mean, as you said before, what can you do if you've let a team get a few points ahead of you? You've simply got to focus on your own game and hope that they get a bit distracted and falter and have a couple of bad fixtures. Who knows? A few injuries, a couple of teams with something to prove, cause a couple of upsets, and suddenly they stop believing. And then if you're in fine form and you're an organised group, that's the gap in the traffic, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I do want to point out as well is it's something I made comment on Twitter earlier today, which was the attendance for the most recent game, which is something that I think is really important, is the fact that those numbers are growing. Obviously, we saw a decent turnout for the first game of the season, but it's just good to see that people are getting down to support this women's team, especially when the games are at Motspur Park. We've seen the numbers climb from about 140 fairly regularly, and in the most recent game we had 189 people at Motspur Park. That's just great to see, and I really want to push and really hope that in this international break, when there's no games at Craven Cottage, that we see some people get down and support Fulham, especially like that nighttime game at Motspur Park, 7:30 kickoff. A great opportunity for families to go down and spend a night out watching Fulham play and supporting the women under lights at Motspur. I think that would be a really great opportunity to get out there and support the Fulham women's team. And again, with the game after against Enfield Town on the Sunday, There's no Fulham on the Saturday, so chuck your Fulham shirt on, get down to Hotspur Park. The tickets are, you know, properly priced, very well priced as well. You'll be able to pick up a ticket for $5 at the most, I think. Anywhere between
Even
one
£5 even.
pound. My bad. Anywhere between £1 and £5 by looking at it for entrance into the park. I think £5 for seating and £1 for standing. So it's just a great opportunity to get down and maybe see some football that you haven't seen before at Fulham, and really get around this women's team who are doing some great things this season. And look, I think if you get down to watch the Enfield game, especially, you're going to see goals. If we have a look back at the league table for the season, Enfield, after 6 games, have a goal difference of -13 and have picked up just 1 point. And this is a Fulham team that put 16 goals past Stenning Town the week before. And I think Enfield probably sit around that same level, maybe not quite that low because they did get promoted last season. But I'd expect this Fulham team, who are putting 4-5 goals past teams who are sitting around them in the league, will really put away a team like Enfield, to make a bit of a statement in the chase for promotion. So definitely do get down. There are tickets available on the Fulham website. You'll be able to buy tickets, I'm pretty sure, at Hotspur Park on the night as well. So get down for the midweek game against Dulwich, get down for the game on Sunday against Enfield, and really get around this team who are doing some amazing things for Fulham this season.
Yeah,
Dad, let's have a
absolutely.
quick look at the goal scorers. Sophie Manzi, still after her 6 goals against Stenning Town in the FA Cup, is still sitting on top of the table. But how good to see such a spread of goal scorers after just 8 games this season.
Definitely. Actually, I must comment on how much I enjoyed your picture painting. It reminded me of when I could have closed my eyes and actually seen all of those goals go in. You sounded like a BBC cricket commentator of old.
I'd love to say
Reading,
it was all my words as well, but it definitely wasn't.
but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. Absolutely no
You
assistance
probably
from any
you probably
coverage.
work out who gave me those comments on the goals by the way they were talked about.
I couldn't tell, Georgia.
No, look, it's great to see the number of goal scorers and the volume of goals as well. I mean, Sophie Manzi with 9, Georgia Heisman with 7, Sasha Adamson got 5, Edie Bichelle's got 5 as well. Sasha Adamson must have probably 10 assists by this point in the season as well. And then the fact that you've got defenders, Megali Mendez, I believe, is a wing back and is on 4 goals this season already. Tia Foreman, we know as well, has 2 from left back. It's just really good to see that the goals are getting spread around the team and it's not reliance on just one person. And you can rotate the squad and still continue to put goals past every team we play against. I think that's it just shows the depth that we've got at the moment. I'm really excited to see how we go later in the season when some other teams who maybe don't have that depth start to struggle with fatigue, start to struggle with, especially runs of fixtures like we have at the moment where there's 3 games within the space of a week. And, we have to remember that these girls have full-time jobs outside of football as well. So to play 3 competitive games of football in a week whilst working a full-time job, it's not easy. And so this is the time when having that depth actually works in our favour.
Yeah, and to reiterate what you said, Jack, in encouraging the sort of broader Fulham fan base to support these girls. This is a good unit. They're a good bunch of girls. They really, really do appreciate the support, which, at 150, 200 people a week are family, friends, and a few diehards. But I think there's some there are many people that we know who follow the Fulham Football Club very, very closely, who also get around the under 21s and the girls. And I just can't echo strongly enough Jack's comments for people to give them a go. I think they're part of the Fulham family, and I think you might get a nice surprise for the energy, the enjoyment, and the passion that you might find watching this Fulham team.
And I'd stress as well, if you have a family and you've got young kids, take them down and almost normalize going to watch women's sport. Um, you'll inspire the next generation of young footballers, male or female. I think it's a great opportunity as well to get up close and personal with these players. There's those moments when you see guys meeting Fulham players out the front of the stadium and they get a quick selfie with them, but you're on the edge of the Motspur Park pitch, up close and personal with these girls, and they, from all accounts, have been great with fans who go along to games and really engage with them. I know, talking with a few people who follow them very closely, and they know these girls personally because they get to have a chat with them after the game, and you don't get that at the elite level, and you don't get that, unfortunately, with anyone who does wear a Fulham shirt usually, because it is such a professional game now and it's a business and you're not really allowed to do that as much. But this is an opportunity to get down and talk to people who should be, idolized by young Fulham fans. So you got a player who scored 6 goals in a game. Like it's amazing stuff, and it's what you want to be showing your kids and saying, this is such a great opportunity to get down and watch Fulham dominate games and really enjoy watching some really good quality football as well.
Absolutely.
Um, let's wrap it up there, though, Dad. I think we've probably talked everyone's ears off already. It's been good to have you back, which is, I think, why we've managed to talk for such a long time, because there's just been so much to cover in the last couple of weeks, and it's actually interesting now going into this international break. How do you feel we're going to cope with it? Do you think it's coming at a good time, especially with the fixtures we've got coming up? Or do you feel like off the back of a win like that we had against Sheffield, maybe it would have been nice to actually have a game this week to sort of keep that momentum going?
No, I'm actually thinking let's have more time for Kenny to be fit. Let's have a bit of time for Issa Diop to recover. Let's have some head scratching to try and work out. We need to come up with a masterstroke, and perhaps some more time on the training ground to get something miraculous out of our forwards. So yeah, I think if we could have 3 weeks, that would be grand.
That's called pre-season and planning. Uh,
Hmm.
wouldn't it be nice if we did some of that? But yeah, look, I tend to agree. I think it's actually good to have a bit of a break. I wasn't expecting it to be. It felt like the last break was just so recently. It feels like this break's come around very quickly again.
Mm.
Um, and it's kind of a shame because I just like talking about Fulham most of the time, and it's weird to not be able to do it for a little while. So we will, though, cover the women's team as they play a couple of games over the next few days. So we'll definitely touch base and pod about that over the next few days. But yeah, it's obviously international break coming up, so do expect that we won't have as much coverage over the next couple of weeks, but we will definitely try to get a few things out. So, Dad, like I said, good to have you back. Hopefully, we
Yeah.
can catch up again pretty soon.
Well, you only live down the road, so that's probably quite
Well,
likely.
I mean, on a podcast, I mean, having to organise sitting down with microphones and slideshows and all that jazz, recording equipment,
Hmm.
and maybe we'll get Sam back at some point once he's recovered from his medical emergency.
Sure.
But again, thank you, Dad, and thank you to everyone who's listened along live. Thank you to everyone who continues to download the podcast and continues to support us. We really appreciate all your support. And until next time, come on, you whites.